Imagine the sound of desert winds, maybe faint echoes of huge construction. Have you ever embarked on a journey knowing deep within your soul that it would change everything? Not just for you, but for generations to come? What if every step took you closer to a destiny foretold, a moment of profound truth and ultimate sacrifice? Today, we retrace the solemn path of a noble soul, the grandson of the final prophet, as he journeyed towards a barren land that would forever echo with his name. We journey with Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, on the momentous second day of Muharram, 61 AH, as destiny unfurled its tragic yet glorious tapestry. And indeed, they planned their plan, and with Allah is the consequence of their plan, even if their plan had been so that mountains would be removed thereby. Surah Ibrahim, 1446. In the scorching heat of the Arabian summer, beneath an unforgiving sun, a caravan moved with quiet determination across the vast rolling plains. It was the year 61 AH in the Islamic calendar. This was a time when the Islamic government, which was once led by fairness and goodness, had fallen into the hands of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Yazid was a ruler known for being cruel and ignoring Islamic values. Imam Hussain, the beloved grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, could not, with a clear conscience, promise his loyalty to such a ruler. To do so would have meant saying that unfairness was okay and giving up the very core of the faith his grandfather had brought. So, Imam Hussain started a dangerous journey from Mecca after leaving his family city of Medina. He wanted to avoid fighting, but was firm in standing for what was right. The journey had started with a mix of hope and worry. Letters had poured in from the people of Kufa, a big city in Iraq. They promised their support and invited Imam Hussain to lead them against Yazid's cruel rule. These letters, hundreds of them, full of promises of loyalty and calls for justice, had painted a picture of welcoming people ready to stand with the Prophet's grandson. Imam Hussain, always a man of peace, didn't want power for himself, but he felt it was his duty to answer the pleas of a community that truly wanted honest Islamic leadership. He understood the huge responsibility that came with being the Prophet's grandson, the one who carried on a legacy of justice. His caravan was not an army for war. It was a small group made up of his respected family, his honorable sister Zainab, his devoted half-brother Abbas, his children, including babies, and a few loyal friends. Every person in that caravan showed strong faith and a firm resolve to stick to their principles. They carried no weapons for attack, but they carried the deep weight of a sacred mission: to stand for what was right, no matter what happened. The dry lands they traveled through seemed to stretch endlessly. Each day brought them further from the sacred calm of Mecca and closer to a future they didn't know. The dust kicked up by their animals' hooves mixed with the spiritual dust of expectation, a strange mix of hope for Kufa's promised support and a deep awareness of the possible dangers ahead. Imam Hussain, a man deeply connected to God's wisdom, had an inner feeling, a spiritual foresight that hinted at the deep trials waiting for him. He knew the world's temptations often hid its true values, and that promises made easily could be broken when facing trouble. This deep understanding didn't stop him. Instead, it made him even stronger. The feeling within the caravan was one of quiet thought and mutual support. The women kept the dignity of the Prophet's household, caring for the children and offering strength through their prayers. The men, though few in number, were giants in faith, their loyalty to Imam Hussain absolute. They knew they were on a difficult path, a path of huge challenges, but one that was lit up by God's purpose. Imam Hussain himself was a source of calm. His presence brought peace, even with the growing tension of their journey. He would often have deep talks with his companions, reciting verses from the Quran, reminding them that this world is temporary and that there is an eternal reward in the afterlife for those who hold on to truth. He spoke of resilience, of patience, and of trusting completely in Allah in all matters. His leadership was not about giving orders, but about inspiring deeply and setting an unwavering example. He was guiding them not to a fight for worldly gain, but to a spiritual confrontation, a stand for eternal values. He was a shining light, moving towards a point where the light of truth would meet the darkness of tyranny. The stage was being set not for a peaceful entry into Kufa. Imam Hussein's small caravan, based on strong principles, kept moving. The troubling whispers from Kufa had now become clear, chilling facts. The promises of loyalty had fallen apart under the cruel hand of Ubaydallah ibn Ziyad, Yazid's harsh governor. Imam Hussain knew very well that the path ahead was full of betrayal, but his determination remained unbroken. He moved with the calm dignity of someone who understood the serious importance of his mission. He was a shining light of truth in a world that was more and more influenced by worldly power and quickly changing loyalties. He had seen visions and received messages from God about his final destiny, yet he continued, fulfilling God's plan with complete obedience. As the sun rose higher on the 2nd of Muharram, casting long, sharp shadows across the dry plains, an unexpected sight appeared on the horizon. A cloud of dust rose up, growing quickly. It announced the arrival of a large force. This was not a welcoming group from Kufa. The organized formation, the gleam of weapons, and the serious faces of the riders showed a different purpose. It was Hurr ibn Yazid al-Tamimi, a commander of the Umayyad army leading 1,000 horsemen. He had been sent with clear orders to stop Imam Hussein's caravan and prevent him from reaching Kufa. The air buzzed with tension as the two groups came closer. It was a sharp contrast between a small group of principled travelers and a strong, well-armed military unit. Prophet Hud, long ago, had seen his people's stubbornness. Now, Imam Hussain faced a similar defiance, but this time it was aimed at stopping him from reaching a place where he believed people still sought God's guidance. God's guidance for Imam Hussain was not a direct order to fight, but to take a stand for truth, to show what was false, and to uphold the legacy of his grandfather. This meeting with Hurr's army was the first direct obstacle, a clear sign that the peaceful path to Kufa was now blocked. Imam Hussain, with his usual calm, spoke to Hurr and his men. He reminded them of his family line, his purpose, and the many invitations he had received from Kufa. He repeated that he had come only because they asked him, trying to bring justice and goodness, not conflict. He stressed how important his mission was and warned them against opposing the Prophet's grandson. However, Hurr, though a noble man who would later make a very important choice, was at that moment bound by the orders of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He explained his instructions to stop Imam Hussain from entering Kufa or going back to Mecca. He was ordered to keep the Imam's caravan in the desolate plains. This direct command from Yazid's governor made it clear that the Umayyads wanted to isolate and control Imam Hussain, forcing him into a corner. The Prophet's grandson, facing this block, offered other ways: to let him go to another Islamic land, or even to let him go before Yazid in Damascus to explain his situation directly. Each offer showed his desire to avoid bloodshed, to give every chance for reason and discussion. But Hurr, under strict orders, could not allow this without direct approval from Ibn Ziyad. This was a moment of huge tension. The weight of prophecy, the duty of leadership, and the immense love for his family and companions rested on Imam Hussein's shoulders. The Umayyad soldiers, though thousands strong, seemed to hesitate, perhaps sensing the huge spiritual presence of the Imam. They stood between him and any chance of safety or rest. The sun beat down without mercy. The desert stretched out in every direction, offering no hiding place. Imam Hussain led his caravan eastward, looking for a place where water might be found. But Hurr's cavalry constantly followed and blocked every turn, forcing them into specific dry areas. The Quranic verses about being firm and facing oppression strongly echoed in this moment. Allah states, "O you who have believed, be patient and endure and remain stationed and fear Allah that you may be successful." Surah Ali Imran 3:200. Imam Hussain showed this firmness. He was not giving in, nor was he starting a fight. He was holding his ground, refusing to say that wrong was right, while actively trying to find a peaceful solution. His position was clear. His life was at risk for the sake of Islam, not for worldly power. He knew that the people of Kufa, once so eager, were now unsure, and that the trap was closing. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next step, the next twist in a story that was quickly heading towards its sad, yet very meaningful end. The desert, once just a background, was now becoming a stage. Its emptiness was a symbol of the spiritual emptiness that had taken over the hearts of those who opposed truth. The caravan was trapped, caught between broken promises and cruel rule, moving towards a future that had been foretold. However, Hurr, though a noble man who would later make a very important choice, was at that moment bound by the orders of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He explained his instructions to stop Imam Hussain from entering Kufa or going back to Mecca. He was ordered to keep the Imam's caravan in the desolate plains. This direct command from Yazid's governor made it clear that the Umayyads wanted to isolate and control Imam Hussain, forcing him into a corner. The Prophet's grandson, facing this block, offered other ways: to let him go to another Islamic land, or even to let him go before Yazid in Damascus to explain his situation directly. Each offer showed his desire to avoid bloodshed, to give every chance for reason and discussion. But Hurr, under strict orders, could not allow this without direct approval from Ibn Ziyad. This was a moment of huge tension. The weight of prophecy, the duty of leadership, and the immense love for his family and companions rested on Imam Hussein's shoulders. The Umayyad soldiers, though thousands strong, seemed to hesitate, perhaps sensing the huge spiritual presence of the Imam. They stood between him and any chance of safety or rest. The sun beat down without mercy. The desert stretched out in every direction, offering no hiding place. Imam Hussain led his caravan eastward, looking for a place where water might be found. But Hurr's cavalry constantly followed and blocked every turn, forcing them into specific dry areas. The Quranic verses about being firm and facing oppression strongly echoed in this moment. Allah states, "O you who have believed, be patient and endure, and remain stationed, and fear Allah, that you may be successful." Surah Ali Imran 3:200. Imam Hussain showed this firmness. He was not giving in, nor was he starting a fight. He was holding his ground, refusing to say that wrong was right, while actively trying to find a peaceful solution. His position was clear. His life was at risk for the sake of Islam, not for worldly power. He knew that the people of Kufa, once so eager, were now unsure, and that the trap was closing. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next step, the next twist in a story that was quickly heading towards its sad yet very meaningful end. The desert, once just a background, was now becoming a stage. Its emptiness was a symbol of the spiritual emptiness that had taken over the hearts of those who opposed truth. The caravan was trapped, caught between broken promises and cruel rule, moving towards a future that had been foretold. The endless chase by Hurr's army finally brought Imam Hussein's caravan to a stop in a desolate plain. The sun beat down, casting long, sharp shadows across the dry ground, and the dry air gave little comfort. This was not a place of green fields or flowing rivers. It was a wilderness, seemingly chosen for how isolated and harsh it was. As they looked at the bleak land, Imam Hussain asked about the name of this particular area. The answers came, perhaps from the few locals or guides who knew the region, gravely, Karbala. When he heard the name, Imam Hussein's face showed deep understanding and acceptance. He repeated the name, his voice filled with a serious tone, solemnly, Karbala, a land of Karb, distress, and Bala, tribulation. It was here, in this dry, ordinary spot, that destiny would fully show itself. This was the place foretold, the place where the ultimate sacrifice for truth would be made. Despite the warning in the name and the desolate surroundings, Imam Hussain made a key decision. He said he wanted to buy the land where they had been forced to camp. This act, seemingly small in the big picture, had huge meaning. It was a symbolic gesture, a claim of ownership and sacredness over the ground where so much truth would be spilled. By buying the land, Imam Hussain made sure that the future site of his martyrdom and that of his companions would be theirs, a sacred trust, not just a place where they were trapped by their enemies. This act of buying the land, even when he faced huge odds, highlights his careful attention to detail and his deep spiritual foresight. He wasn't just stopping. He was making the place holy for eternal remembrance. His companions, seeing his calm determination amidst the growing despair of their situation, found new strength in his example. They quickly started setting up their tents, creating a small, temporary safe place in the middle of this dry plain. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with colors of orange and purple, more dark figures appeared on the horizon. This time it was the main Umayyad army led by Umar ibn Sa'd, who had taken command after being pressured by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Their numbers were shocking, far outnumbering the small group with Imam Hussain. The arrival of this huge force, maybe as many as 20,000 to 30,000 men, completely surrounded Imam Hussein's camp. The trap was closing, leaving no doubt that their forced stop at Karbala was not a temporary break, but a planned move by the enemy to corner them. The immediate emotional pressure on the caravan was immense. Any hope for help from Kufa, which had almost disappeared, now completely vanished. They were truly alone, surrounded by a huge force determined to force loyalty or kill the Imam. The spiritual weight of the moment became very clear. Imam Hussein's firmness in the face of such overwhelming odds was like a shining light. He had chosen his principles over safety, God's command over worldly compromises. This strong stance by itself was a turning point. He could have chosen to give in or to retreat earlier, but his arrival at Karbala and his calm decision to set up camp there, despite the terrible situation, sealed his fate and defined his lasting legacy. This was not giving up. It was a clear, conscious acceptance of God's plan. The Imam and his companions understood that they were now in a very difficult test, facing a trial of faith unlike any other. The first signs of a blockade started right away. While water was not completely cut off on this exact day, the presence of the huge army and their smart positioning hinted at the coming lack of water. The desert heat, combined with the emotional weight of being surrounded, made the need for water a constant, painful worry. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had often spoken of challenges and tests for believers and the bravery needed to uphold truth. The strong is not the one who overcomes people by his strength, but the strong is the one who controls himself while in anger. Sahih Bukhari, Volume 8, Book 73, Hadith 135. And Imam Hussain showed this strength, staying calm and dignified even as the enemy gathered. The land of Karbala itself, now a silent witness to this unfolding drama, became a symbol of struggle, sacrifice, and God's judgment. Its dryness stood in sharp contrast to the green gardens and rich springs that the Ad had taken for granted and then misused. Here, water would soon become a key part of the suffering and ultimate sacrifice, a mirror reflecting the spiritual thirst of those who turned away from truth. The stage was fully set. Everyone was in place. The 2nd of Muharram was not just the day of arrival, it was the day the curtain officially opened on the most heartbreaking tragedy in Islamic history. A start to the deep lessons that would come from that scorched earth for all time. The 2nd of Muharram, 61 Aha, marks not just a date on the Islamic calendar, but a very important turning point, a deep lesson that echoes through time. The arrival of Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, in Karbala, a dry land that would soon be watered with sacred blood, was a moment that continues to teach humanity about principles, sacrifice, and strong faith. This event, so central to the Muharram remembrance, has a timeless connection to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had long told about the tragedy of Karbala and the martyrdom of his beloved grandson. Stories tell us that the Prophet, peace be upon him, loved Hussein immensely, saying, "Hussein is from me, and I am from Hussein. Allah loves those who love Hussein." Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Book 46, Hadith 3775. He had cried when he was shown a handful of soil from Karbala, predicting the future suffering. This connection to the Prophet makes Imam Hussein's arrival in Karbala not a random event, but the fulfillment of God's plan, a destined act of sacrifice to keep the true meaning of Islam alive. The very soil of Karbala, therefore, holds a sacredness born from the blood that would soon feed it, a spiritual legacy directly linked to the purest family line of the Prophet. Imam Hussein's firm stand from the moment he left Medina until his arrival in Karbala showed the Prophet's own struggle against unfairness and his focus on standing for justice, even at great personal cost. The lasting impact of this moment in Islamic teachings is profound. First, it strongly shows the importance of standing firm on principles, istiqamah. Imam Hussein's journey to Karbala was not an act of fighting for power, but a strong refusal to accept a corrupt system. His arrival marked the point of no return for this principled stand. At this point, there was no way to compromise if truth was to be protected. This teaches Muslims that sometimes upholding justice and rejecting falsehood is more important than personal safety or worldly comfort. Second, it highlights the idea of test and trial. Ibtila. Just as the Ad were tested with blessings, Imam Hussain and his companions were tested with hardship. Their journey to Karbala was a severe test, making their faith stronger and showing how deeply committed they were to Allah. This reminds modern Muslims that life is full of tests, and how we face them, with patience and trust in Allah, defines our spiritual path. For modern Muslims, the 2nd of Muharram and the arrival at Karbala offer incredibly valuable lessons. Courage in hard times. Imam Hussein's calm and peaceful behavior in an increasingly hostile situation teaches us the power of inner strength and strong faith when facing huge challenges. It inspires us to stand firm on our beliefs, even when it feels like everyone is against us. The importance of our choices. The story of Karbala, starting with this arrival, is a clear reminder that every choice has results. Imam Hussein's choice was one of deep sacrifice for truth, while the choices made by his oppressors led to eternal punishment. This encourages us to think about the right and wrong and spiritual effects of our daily decisions.
Community and loyalty. The strong loyalty of Imam Hussein's small group of companions, who chose to stay with him even knowing the great danger, highlights the thoughtful, huge value of true loyalty and brotherhood and sisterhood in faith. It reminds us, reflective, how important it is to have people around us who strengthen our resolve to do good. The sacredness of purpose. Imam Hussein's act of buying the land of Karbala, even in such terrible conditions, symbolizes how sacred his mission was, and the deep spiritual meaning he gave to every step of his journey. It teaches us to do our actions with deep purpose and intention, aiming to please Allah in everything we do. The events of Muharram, especially those leading up to Ashura, are not just old stories. They are emphatic, living lessons, always important. The arrival at Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram was the serious opening act of a divine drama, a moment when truth began its final, bright confrontation with falsehood. It was a moment of decision, of commitment, and of deep expectation for what was to come. The dry plain, once just a patch of sand, became a sacred place, waiting to see an unmatched sacrifice. Let the sounds of those hoofbeats and the whispers of that day stay in our hearts. Let them remind us that true victory is not in winning in this world, but in firmly sticking to truth and justice, no matter the cost. For Allah, the All-Knowing, weaves His lessons into the fabric of time, and the story of Karbala's arrival stands as an reverent eternal shining light for those who seek guidance.